Juan, how you doing? Long time.
Doing all right. Happy as a cricket.
Happy as a cricket. Momentous occasion, huh? Momentous.
Yeah.
I think we haven't had this much excitement since like Reloaded, which was back when, I forget now, 2017? Was it 2018? 2017?
Yeah. So it's been a major investment here. Yeah.
Yeah, big time. So basically, we're going to run through this good old-fashioned Juan Colón style and an exciting announcement. So I would really like to pick your brains today on a few things, given that it's a really important milestone in the company's history. I sort of want to play it such that you can express yourself all the way historically, as well as what this means, this new critical milestone, what it means for Darwinex, for the future, how we've evolved up until now, and generally how it's going to pan out going forward. So with the launch of stocks and futures, where do you see Darwinex headed? And let's take a step back and talk about why this is a critical milestone in our evolution as a company, and what that means. Well, how you would like to express that as a co-founder first before anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since it's going to be almost 10 years since my brother and I hit on this gap, this friction between strategies and capital, and we've been going at it ever since. So we've added a range of fintech assets to a rucksack. So first came the asset management license, then came the brokerage license, and then we've basically hit on the fact that CFDs, which from our standpoint as guys coming from Mars, were a really good thing.
So if I understand it correctly, our reason for starting out in FX and CFDs was to go to market with as low a barrier of entry for sake of adoption, right? And exchange traded assets were really always on the agenda.
Well, not just that. I mean, it's also like, I mean, it was the lowest barrier to entry for us as first-time entrepreneurs, and then also it was the natural starting point where a future manager would start out 5 to 10 years ago. I mean, that was the one place you would start, because you're not going to start out trading futures, are you? I mean, you just don't have the capital, not to mention the confidence in yourself to start trading a futures account when you get going, right? So,
well, at the very least, the margin requirements are a lot harder.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to put up a lot more capital. So in that way, it just wasn't suited to the kind of journey we wanted to facilitate. But then we've basically realized that the sweet spot is a bit higher, in that we will always be there to facilitate the journey from whoever starts out with a very small account sizes, but the sweet spot to value what we bring to the table is slightly higher, more professional than that. In that sense, we realized that adding exchange listed instruments was a must. And and this project goes back a couple of years now, but now it's actually done. So we've completed a lot of milestones to make sure that the entire strategy generation, like signal part of the stack, goes all the way to the execution for the investors, and then also all the nuts and bolts of a regulated broker to extend those from cash settled instruments into exchange listed instruments. It's been a major investment of work.
It also ties in really nicely, I think, from the client's perspective, because over the last few years, you'll well know, obviously, from your experience and engagements, that clientele has tended to express a heightened interest in more regulated, centralized product offerings. Anyway, you can see how micro futures have entered on certain contracts over time, and people have just generally started sort of gravitating towards more regulated, more centralized products or portfolios anyway. So it's very good timing, I suppose, on our part to marry the two, client demand as well as where the company's headed in terms of its objectives from day one anyway.
I mean, the company is headed in the exact same direction that it's always been headed, which is to power meritocracy, pairing strategy providers with capital providers. It's just we have more tools to hit the sweet spot where the sort of strategy providers are and the sort of investors are that our tool is designed to service. It seems as though without the exchange listed instruments, we were just not exactly where the action was happening.
Fantastic. So on that note of tools and exchange listed instruments, so what are we launching then in terms of our asset roadmap?
So we're launching. We're adding the first element of our exchange listed roadmap. I mean, to recap, we always want to be in the top 10, 15% of liquid references that drive 90% of the market volumes. That's always been and will be our mantra. So what we're launching now is the beginnings of that target when it comes to exchange listed instruments, and it's two things. On the one hand, we're launching the full scope integration between the Darwin universe and exchange listed instruments, which is kind of the N-wheel solution, and then also starting out with the Swiss knife of market access, in the sense that through one platform we can service a lot of trading terminals, and we can service a lot of assets in a lot of jurisdictions. So it's going to be the sort of the workhorse for us to expand into new markets and then new asset classes with a single pipe, to get things going.
So that effectively means that Darwinex can now service or provide access to stocks and futures. It's just US stocks at the moment, and just over 60 futures contracts, I believe, cross exchange.
Yeah, but I mean that's just the start. Of course, people will say, why just US? It's US stocks. Well, because they're the easiest to get going. But the bulk of the technical work to launch any stock is essentially done, and from here, the biggest restriction will essentially be liquidity. So we will not add every stock on the planet because of liquidity concerns, but from a technical standpoint, the pipes are now built, and we'll, over the coming months, we'll be adding more and more stocks to the universe as we go, and not just stocks and futures, potentially also ETFs. So essentially, all the Delta One instruments where the trading, the volume actually is. Yeah.
I imagine that these additional exchange listed instruments are now available to people through Trader Workstation and any Trader Workstation supported vendor platforms, wouldn't it? That would include NinjaTrader, MultiCharts, and a variety of other API supported tools.
Correct. And then also the integration works backwards. So all these assets will eventually find their way into the MT5 platform as well, so that people who are used to trading on that OTC side of things, they will have full access to the exchange listed assets as well. So it's going to be like a dual footprint where we'll do the OTC and CFD instruments on MT5 and the exchange listed instruments on MT5, and then Trader Workstation will list the most exchange listed instruments as we add them. But two ways to feed the exchange, and then ultimately one exchange product which will be available to all investors.
Brilliant. On that subject of asset classes going forward, so this is obviously a phased rollout, understandably so, right? From multiple angles, not just from obviously rolling out a whole new set of asset classes, but also we have to consider the risk engine. You mentioned Delta One assets earlier on. Do you want to elaborate a bit for in the interest of people listening to this who are primarily interested in the stocks and futures offering, but who may not necessarily know the sort of nuances of why Delta One versus the whole universe from the risk engine's perspective? Could you shed some light on how that was decided and what it means from the risk engine's perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, to bridge the gap between strategies and capital, the traditional value chain is front office trades, what they want to trade. The middle office manages risk so that the investors don't blow up, and the back office makes sure that all the tax returns get filed on time. And what we do is we compress all that into a single piece of kit that we call the risk engine, and we could call it like the asset factory, really, because that's what it's doing. It takes a strategy trading any of those assets on the roadmap and packages the map as a notional asset that any investor can back through a managed account, through a wrapper, and potentially as a swap, as a CFD. And as everything with technology, the first iteration, like the first copies of Windows 95 cost like 10 billion to build, and the second one cost 10 cents. So that's what happens with technological, IP. It's just very hard to get the first one through the pipe, but once that one's through the pipe, then all the others can flow repeatably and scalably. And that's why this one just, it was a bit of a long pregnancy, if you want to look at it that way.
I love your analogies. So to abstract one layer higher for people who haven't yet sort of had exposure to the Darwinex ecosystem, essentially you are able to securitize any trading strategy, trading stocks, futures, or any other supported asset class into an asset that can be listed for the benefit of investors to buy and sell, and for the benefit of the trader to charge for success on a high watermark basis. Am I accurate in that description?
Yeah, it's a strategy exchange that meets all the regulatory requirements, but recombines the components in a more efficient way. I guess that's the way to look at it.
Brilliant, brilliant. So stocks and futures is obviously a start, right? Do we foresee, from two perspectives, adding more asset classes, exchange listed instruments as we go forwards? And do we plan on supporting those for securitization as well, like supporting the risk engine, supporting them as well going forward? Because you've got lots of traders who trade cross asset class portfolios, and with us delving into this realm of stocks and futures, exchange listed derivatives in general, we'll likely see more interest from people who will probably request more asset class inclusion going forward. So is there something you can say at this point about that, or is that something in discussion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the three main assets that are on our site right now, as I said, are equities, futures, and ETFs. With those three, we think we will basically close the loop of the biggest missing points up to now. Of course, there's a situation in that our risk engine is actually a volatility and correlation engine, and of course correlation complexity grows exponentially with the number of references. So to add the first 20 stocks is trivial. The first 200 stocks is trivial too, but the jump from 200 to 500, or the jump from 500 to 1,000 and so on, that becomes exponentially harder, not to mention the liquidity constraints. So for sure, we're going to do futures, equities, and the ETFs. In what pace, that that really depends on client interest, and also making sure that we preserve the best possible operational experience from both the strategy provider as well as the investor standpoint. So we'll be cautious, but as I said, the pipes are now built. We just need to monitor the flow as it goes through, and then gradually, as we feel more comfortable, then we'll add more instruments to the configuration of the pipes.
Brilliant. And from a trader's perspective, somebody who's already got an existing track record or is quite comfortable in, say, the TWS or TWS-supported universe of platforms or API level access, is Darwinex planning on facilitating them to sort of leverage our stack to be able to list their existing strategies without having to necessarily start from scratch? This is something that we did really well with the MetaTrader side of things in the FX and CFD space, where we made it quite seamless for an existing track record holder to come and take advantage of the Darwinex offering without having to give anything up. Is there something that's on the horizon for the exchange traded trader audience as well going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, the interactive brokers is an established ecosystem. So what we'll work towards is replicating the account migration feature, whereby Ali has an existing relationship with interactive brokers or an interactive brokers partner, and then he requests to migrate that track record, which then we pull in server side from the interactive broker servers, which sort of does away with the certification need, because interactive brokers can act as a certification, as the auditor of first resort for that. So yeah, by all means, we plan to support that feature, but it's part of the phased approach that that will come going forward. But like, to cut a long story short, don't worry, you're not going to lose your track record if it's already with interactive brokers. It will port adequately from wherever it is now to us.
So the migration function is effectively an import of existing history to henceforth continue on Darwinex and at the other place, should you wish to do both.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. So we've talked about the nitty-gritties and the technicalities, right? Now, you as CEO and as co-founder, let's go back all the way to passionate old Tradeslide days, where how does this make you feel, given that we've taken this step now? We're launching this. We're going into exchange traded asset classes here. We're expanding quite aggressively with the number of ways people can access this offering now, compared to what we've had so far. How does this make you feel as a co-founder? What thoughts would you like to share? And not as CEO, but just as you and your brother and every other party involved who went down this road to make this a reality. We're not just a broker at the end of the day. We're a bit more. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure everyone else would appreciate hearing a bit of the visionary here as to why we've come here and where we're going from here.
Well, I mean, I think we started the right journey at about the right time, in the sense that we've invested a lot in solving a problem which was a problem for a reasonable few people who had started trading in the early 2000s. I think there's been this flurry of activity with the advent of Robin Hoods and the likes. That's going to be like a fresh cohort of people who graduate to the peanut problem. The peanut problem is the one where, regardless of how well you trade peanuts, if you trade peanuts, you just make peanuts.
Sure.
And we've got all this stack which is designed from the ground up to solve this problem in an online fashion. It was just missing the right instruments to have mass market appeal. Of course, I guess the one concern is, not concern, or the big elephant in the room is crypto. In the sense that we know that a lot of people who are cutting the teeth in trading today will most likely start out with crypto, because that's where the volatility has been in the last couple of years. But all in, I think this marks the end of the beginning for Darwinex, in the sense that in these years we've built the technology, we've proven it's possible, we've built a business model, we've proven it works, and we've secured all the regulatory licenses and kept them in the crates of all these years. Yeah. So I think I can think of few players as well equipped to do what we're trying to do right now, and I think we have the maturity to understand that no, this is not going to be a walk in the park, but yes, it's certainly possible and by all means worth doing. So yeah, bring it on. We're just going to keep at it.
Fantastic. And obviously this expands our brand footprint. With the inclusion of exchange traded assets like we have. Can you also speak to any plans as part of this phased rollout or after, or what have you, as to the geographic footprint of Darwinex going forwards? Are we considering the North Americas? Are there any other geographies on the horizon? Can you speak to that, or is it premature? Just sort of throwing things at you.
So there's been a number of things going on the corporate side as well, welcoming some pretty heavyweight partners in our shareholding who are very familiar with both sides of the oceans, looking at the world from the European standpoint. So we're looking both west toward the US as well as east to the APAC region. So we're evaluating that. I think the big goal for this year is to really deliver on the asset roadmap and make sure that the product is technically there. Once it's technically there, we're sure that it's going to attract interest from people, and then we will prioritize the regulatory delivery of this, which is another pregnancy in its own right, to bring this to the different parties. But yeah, so that we're going to expand both the geographies as well the product offering, in the sense that I'm personally working on a new expansion to our toolkit, which is the professional element of this, to cater to the needs of not just aspiring but also proving and proven managers. There'll be more on that later this year. But for now, the important thing, the cornerstone, is to get this one right, and and prove that the microchip indeed works.
Fantastic. I think that covers pretty much what we wanted to share with everybody. If you have any closing statement I think we've covered pretty much everything from a technical as well as brand standpoint. Anything you'd like to share on the way out? How people can make this success for us? We've rolled it out.
it's taken us 10 years to build it, but the microchip is now there. So what on earth are you waiting for? I mean, that's basically the summary. Why would you go with the legacy stuff when the microchip is already there?
Fantastic.
No need to go for the calculator.
Brilliant. Any thoughts on how people can perhaps support us through this phased rollout in terms of feedback provision, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just understanding that it's in the beginning it's always hard. So just to give us, I mean, if you see something that's off, please let us know, and we'll make sure to add it. And then by all means, if you know people who you think could benefit from a microchip instead of counting by hands, by all means let them know, because it's a win-win for you, because you'll get them on board, talk about the same thing as you. It's a win-win for us, because the more resources we've got, the faster we can invest into making this happen, and it's a win-win for them, because why on earth would you stick with 18th century technology when the future's been invented?
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Juan. Really appreciate it. Excited.
Thank you, Ali. Pleasure to have you with us.
Nice one.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers, Juan.
Bye.